So, speaking of the issue of major modes of thinking about government, in this past century, we've moved away from the idea, not wholly, but largely away from the idea of the communist ideology of ownership of the means of production, the Marxian dogma that that is what a society's a good society, a society that is obeying the law of dialectical materialism does. It means that the means of production will be at the disposal of the workers who produce, the producers, really, if you think about it, those that actually carry out the production, as opposed to those in the management that are the overhead, not part of the actual productive process. So the idea is to, part of it is the idea of, if you own those means of production, you don't have to be subservient in terms of economics. The economics of distribution, so-called distribution economics, distribution of wealth. At any rate, so that we've moved away from saying that this is a Cold War conflict based upon communism versus the West. Now, we're in a different ballpark. But it is important to look at the history of Marxism versus an alternative that was not beholden to the categories of capitalism in Marxist Das Kapital, where embedded in that framework is the idea of a struggle of classes. It's there. It's not, that's embedded in the framework. There will be a struggle of classes. That's a material law, but it's not. The people that are around the faction that Benjamin Franklin enunciated for what a good government was, the creation of the foundation of the American country as an economic, what are the precepts involved? What were the clashes for those precepts? Because Franklin's notion was that society had to be based upon the principle of doing the good. Compare that with the idea of a class struggle, that you must win a struggle, a class must win that struggle, as opposed to the idea of a society itself must be ruled from a principle of doing the good. Now the question immediately becomes, what is the good? And if you look at the fact that you had this influence in the original birthplace of this idea of Franklin's, which goes back all the way to Cotton Mather and the people that were opposing the British Crown as being really, they necessarily didn't say it, they said it in religious terms, but where they really were opposing the arbitrary rule of conventions. It was, a lot of it was posed, like I say, in religious terms. So the idea of that you opposed needless conventions, religious conventions, as just that all they're there for is to kind of create a ruling caste that can control things. The whole idea of the saints, the relics, and these what you would call it is just an intensive conditioning based upon daily routines, controlling your daily routines. In a very similar way that you had the Roman household gods, the Lares, for example, the gods of the household and the hearth. You had to follow step by step the rites. So when you get into a situation where you have these religious rites that are founded upon things like doing a rosary, that is, you can get the same idea of rite in other religions in all from different perspectives. Like meditation could be one of them, a type of rite. Making a prayer daily at a preserved time, like the dawn or the dusk. That could be a rite. In fact, if you think about that, well, what was solar worship? It's a rite. There were rites that go back. Look at the rites of the most horrifying rites of all time, which really is worthy in and of itself for a major discussion of this. But if you look at the Aztecs, what did their rite become? Human sacrifice. They have to do that to appease the gods. The gods want you to do these human sacrifices. Go back and see that as the basis of the Homer's works. Fall of Troy, all hinged upon violation of humanity, really. It became, for example, how can a god warrant you to sacrifice your own daughter or something like that? What kind of arbitrary power is that? And once that arbitrary power actually what could be shown to be not only irrational but downright evil. That power is wanting you to do something that is in fact evil. It's the opposite of doing the good, doing the evil. So the question is, though, in terms of, because the problem with seeing the difference between Benjamin Franklin's idea of a government and Marx's idea of a government is you have to couch it in much more sophisticated terms of economics. And the problem with that is that what economics should be is the application of inventions, of great inventions, to better society, which is definitely what Franklin not only vocalized, but he was doing. For example, and this is a great one, we have these ideas that intellectual property today. Did Franklin have that? Yeah, I mean, it was there. Patents were definitely around. They've been around. They go, who knows how far back this idea of patents came. You had a patent from the family, whoever was royal in power. You received a patent. That's why you could have piracy the way you did, because you received a patent to be a pirate. But so the idea of patents, including intellectual patents, that was around. Although, if you look at interesting case here is Edgar Allan Poe, who fought to try to enforce copyright, because it was a Wild West during his time. You could be the intellectual author of something, and you had no right to it whatsoever. It's interesting that, in fact, I guess that's kind of happening today. If you look at these YouTube channels, for example, people will copy and try to fundraise. They'll take somebody else's work and just brand it as their own, and then try to raise the funds based upon that kind of sleight of hand. So that's what's going on from the standpoint of patents and copyrights and so forth. But anyhow, to get back, Franklin did what? He gave us the lightning rod without patenting it. You know, think of his work on firefighting. It was all part of the same thing. It was like a problem. How do we stop lightning from burning down people's houses? Especially if you think about it, if you're moving outside of the city and you're pioneering, you could call it, settling, pioneering, land. Lightning could be a real big problem if you're isolated in that way in the United States or the colonies. So you had to have fire brigades that he set up. This was for Philadelphia. I mean, it was just part of the idea in general of doing the good, setting up citizen groups that would come to the aid of, in that case, fire. But Franklin extended this idea, this principle of doing the good, to the idea of having circles, his junto organizations. It started out needing to be conspiratorial due to the revolutionary times, and so that a lot of the members weren't even known to each other, that they were part of it, part of those circles, those juntos, which is kind of interesting organizing principle. You don't have to go around with a label on yourself saying, I am a Marxist, I am a trade unionist, I am a conservative, I am for all-out continuous warfare, never ending. That's what I'm for. So you don't have to go around with those kinds of labels for this, that, or the other thing, because in the end, the principles, the higher principles of the ideas themselves will win out one way or the other. For example, look at what we have right now. If we have a faction that is there that wants to do the good, it's happening, but only from the standpoint of almost as a project that solves some other current would-be problem, like the greenhouse effect. So fusion energy, for example, nuclear fusion, which is, you could just take the principle of doing the good, and that is the good, because it means a revolution in society's underpinnings as mode of production. And it means potentially uplifting humanity as part of a lot of other projects that are required to save lives, to extend the health span of your population, because that potential should be something which is generative in terms of, and this is an interesting point in the history of ideas, because remember, I was talking about Franklin, and he himself, although he didn't specify it, but his set, his mold, his way of thinking about things really sprung from Leibniz. because Leibniz's idea was that you have a perfect rule of the universe. It's perfect and it's good. And as long as we, humanity, strive towards that kind of good, obeying that kind of good, not just passively worshiping it, but doing the good. Remember, what Franklin, his philosophy was doing the good. He wasn't just talking about worshiping the good, but doing it. So that means certain things need to be done right now, and those have to be promoted. If you're not promoting those certain things, I don't care what your analysis is of the today's issues. You may be right in your analysis as far as that goes. But if you're not promoting an alternative to a calamitous collapse on the planet that is there, then what good are you doing, really? Are you doing the good by doing that? Just analyzing it? Not really. I mean, you might say, well, if I have a certain attitude, a mental attitude that says these are the way things are going to go, I guess that in a really tangential way, which is not the same idea as doing the good. Doing the good means you need a government ordered that can last for future generations to do the good. This is why Plato's Republic, topic of what happens, go back to what I was saying, increasing the health span of the population. What happens when population, when you have generations that have been here on this planet longer than the current generations that are in positions of power? Well, if you're still around, you haven't caused many, horrible problems, and therefore seen as an apostate to the rulers that be, then you look at how can governments be created, like Socrates did, that are going to be based on the principles of what is truth. What is truth? What is good? How do you have a government that's based on that? And that really is the issue. And that's why the principle, I go back to what I started with looking at how Marx can be thoroughly disproven, because what he takes as economics is something that's totally fixed. That is, the material process of producing goods is just part of a mechanism. But that's not how it works. That's not how you have progress. In other words, progress changes the rules of who owns production, etc. What are the means of production? Move to whole new means and modes of producing. You can produce right now, for example. We could, if as a society we made our minds up to it, probably produce manufacturing at this point, almost totally robotically, where humans are overseers in it at a certain point, but even that is being farmed out via chat GBT like AI. So then the question becomes, all right, this idea that there's even still working class itself is kind of funny in a lot of ways. Yeah, there are people that work in manufacturing, but they're totally disparate areas of manufacturing. For example, manufacturing videos. Manufacturing, let's take something off the wall. Manufacturing video games. What is that? Is that producing? What are you producing? You're producing a game. And that's a huge part of our economy, isn't it? Entertainment. What are you doing when you're entertained? Are you producing anything? No. So you have this big service economy that has all these facets that want to call themselves producing something, like producing intellectual stuff, like these videos on YouTube, or producing. I'm a what's the term that they use? It's almost skipped my mind, but I produce this intellectual stuff, just comes out of me, or it could just be I'm an influencer. And I'm not producing really anything other than an image. And you like my image. Therefore, I'm going to make strange comments and have style, but no thought intended whatsoever. I'll just look good. And you will follow me. Give me money because I look good. So that's an influencer or creator, I guess they call it. I was thinking about content creator. Content creator. Yeah, you're producing something. Content. This video I'm producing. Yeah, well, the guys that are created the camera and created the hardware as part of what I'm on right now, like the computer system here, that hardware. Although these days, really, you need little other than a phone, and you can pretty much do what these influencers do on TikTok, this, that, or the other thing, and make all oodles of money for sweet nothings. Isn't that what common culture, pop culture, let's put it that way, marketing sweet nothings? I am a content creator, producer of sweet nothings. It means nothing. But you enjoy it just as much as I do, and in terms of bringing these great advertisers to you. We can all agree it's all a farce. We know that. We're not going to get upset. We're going to chill. I'll tell you how to chill. You can find your chill channel anywhere you want. Turn things off. Don't have to think about anything other than the commercials that are part and parcel, without which content creation couldn't happen. It wouldn't work. You couldn't just have people saying, I'm not going to worry about intellectual, whoever said this first. Because these days, to say that kind of thing, Benjamin Franklin gave us the lightning rod. But to say, I'm not really concerned because, say, right now I'm a retired fellow. I'll go back to this idea of Socrates and saying that if you're of an older generation, you want to start telling younger generations how great society should function. That's what his republic was all about. In his terms at that day, it's, you can't translate it one-on-one, of course, to today, but the principle is the same, really. What kind of a society do we want to have as we go out and to so-called outer space, and we start using advancements in technology to create habitations all over this galaxy. All over the galaxy. We inhabit it. And we're doing it because now the lifespan is easily 1,000, 2,000 years. And I'm going to go to wherever it is we're going to have a settlement. And I'm going to be part of setting it up because I got 2,000 years. That's my life, my health span. We try to make it, of course, infinite. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point being, what kind of government do we require? How can we say, for example, that we're going to have property rights of a nations out there? What is this? What is a nation after you're off this planet and you're seeking to go to other places and set up a society? What is a nation up there? What does it even meaning does that have in the end? It won't have any meaning. It won't have any meaning. You can say, well, a language group is a nation. We'll keep this language. But will we? Because what's going on right now with AI, where we're being able to pretty much almost momentarily translate things, although what we can't translate is just as important what we can. Because one thing we can't, AI, and this whole idea that AI is going to take over, it's all nonsense. It's just a tool. And if you start seeing it as something that's going to not just be a tool, but a dictator or something like that, this is going to tell you what you must do. No freedom. You will have no freedom. You know, that's what these fantasies about what AI is. But from the standpoint of languages, for example, will we really have still language groups? Because AI will be able to instantaneously, moment by moment, translate that. And a lot of that has to do that translation power, really, with not just the programs themselves that are more refined, deep learning, machine learning, that allows you to speed up simultaneous translations, so that even as you go out forward, you have a move for total fluency in, no matter what you're speaking, someone will understand you based upon, for example, say they might have a translation capability in their ear at all times, almost to implantation. If you think about, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, it could be non-invasive. I mean, Musk is thinking about making these kinds of things invasive. They're just implanted. But then that leaves an issue about what is it you're implanting, because isn't that idea going to progress itself? Is it all fixed? You're just implanting one device? That doesn't make any sense. We don't think that way. That's not what progress is. The idea of the be-all and end-all of one device that's going to be implanted somewhere in your nervous system to allow you to have the internet or the access to AI automatically. But then the question is, as I say, you're going to implant this thing. Don't you think that in the future there's going to be new breakthroughs that's going to make this thing obsolete, just in the same way that the batteries that Tesla uses right now are going to be obsolete, because we're going to come up with something much better, much better. It could even be a nuclear fusion battery. There are people now that are talking about miniaturizing nuclear fusion reactions. I don't know, Mr. Fusion. Could be, it's possible. Who knows? But we do know what the issue with the government that's going to allow us. We have to get beyond these differences to recognize that humanity itself has a higher purpose than these squabbles about really what in the long arc of history are meaningless. Totally meaningless, that we've been killing each other recklessly and meaninglessly for all these years that I sit here the entirety of my life, which I'm now turning 70 in a couple of days. We've been at it. It's like a throw-over from clubbing each other over the head with anything we can grab, any stick or whatever and just clobbering you because that's the rule, that's the law of the jungle. At any rate, I'm going to end this video here because it's been about a half an hour, and that is where I want to wind up. Thanks for listening, if you are listening, and tune in again. I'll be back.